I never thought the day would come when I'd sit in a lawyer's office, surrounded by my own family, and feel like a complete stranger. But there I was, on a cold Tuesday morning in March, watching my entire world crumble with just a few words from a man in an expensive suit. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my parents gave everything they owned to my sister Emma, leaving me with nothing but the bitter taste of a lifetime of favoritism finally coming to its ugly conclusion. The law office was one of those fancy places downtown, with mahogany furniture and oil paintings of dead judges staring down at you, the kind of place that screams money and power. I remember thinking how fitting it was that this would be where my family's final act of cruelty would play out. I arrived 15 minutes early, as I always do. It's a habit I picked up from years of trying to prove myself worthy of my parents' attention. The receptionist, a blonde woman with perfectly manicured nails, barely looked up when I gave her my name. She just pointed toward a waiting area with leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Emma walked in exactly on time, which was typical for her. She never had to arrive early to prove anything to anyone. She was the golden child, after all. At 35, 3 years younger than me, she looked every bit the successful suburban mom she'd become. Designer handbag, perfect hair. That confident smile that had always made me feel invisible. "Sarah," she said, giving me one of those awkward half hugs that families do when they're not really close but feel obligated to show affection. "How are you holding up?" It had been 2 months since Dad's funeral. Mom had passed away the year before, a long battle with cancer that had drained not just her body, but apparently their entire emotional capacity for dealing with me. Dad followed her 6 months later, his heart giving out on a Sunday morning while he was reading the newspaper in his favorite chair. "I'm managing," I replied, which was the truth. I was managing to get through each day without completely falling apart, which felt like an accomplishment given the circumstances. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of smooth voice that probably made him very good at his job. He shook our hands and led us into his office, where a mahogany table was set up with several stacks of paper. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. "I know this is a difficult time for both of you, but we need to go through your father's will and settle his estate." I sat down, my hands folded in my lap, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. I knew my parents had money. Dad had built a successful construction company from the ground up, and Mom had been smart with investment. Their house in the suburbs was worth at least $500,000. And that was before you counted the vacation home in Florida, the savings accounts, and Dad's business assets. Emma and I had never really talked about inheritance. It seemed morbid while our parents were alive, and after they died we were both too grief-stricken to think about money. But I assumed, like most people would, that things would be split fairly between us. We were both their daughters, after all. Miss Henderson opened the folder in front of him and cleared his throat. "Your father updated his will about 6 months before his passing," he began. "He was very specific about his wishes." I felt a small knot forming in my stomach. Something about the way he said very specific didn't sound good. "The will is straightforward," he continued. "All assets, including the family home, the vacation property in Fort Lauderdale, the business, and all financial accounts, are to be transferred to Emma Richardson, his daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt the air leave my lungs. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. Mr. Henderson looked at me with what might have been sympathy, but his voice remained professional. "Your father left everything to your sister. The only mention of you in the will is a single sentence stating that you are to receive nothing from the estate." The room started to spin a little. I gripped the arms of my chair and tried to process what I was hearing. "There has to be some mistake," I said. "Why would he do that?" Emma was sitting very still beside me. I turned to look at her, expecting to see shock or confusion on her face, but instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She didn't look surprised at all. "You knew," I said, the realization hitting me like a truck. "You knew about this." She finally looked at me, and there was something almost pitying in her expression. "Sarah," I tried to talk to them about it, but they were clear about their decision. Their decision? I stood up so quickly that my chair scraped against the floor. "What decision? What did I do to deserve this?" Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "There's actually a letter," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Your father asked me to give this to you after reading the will." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. My name was written on the front in Dad's familiar handwriting. I tore it open, not caring that I was probably being too rough with what might be the last thing my father ever wrote to me. The letter was short, just 1 page, but every word felt like a knife. Sarah, it began. By now you know that we've left everything to Emma. This wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Emma gave us grandchildren and a legacy to be proud of. She built a stable life with a good man and created the family we always dreamed of. You gave us nothing but problems and disappointment. Your choices have consistently shown us that you cannot be trusted with responsibility or money. Emma has proven herself worthy of our legacy. You have not. We hope someday you'll understand that this was an act of love, protecting our life's work from being wasted. Your mother and I love you, but love doesn't mean ignoring reality. I read the letter twice before the words really sank in. Then I looked up at Emma, who was watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Did you help them write this? I asked. Sarah, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Don't make this harder. I could hear my voice getting louder. But I didn't care. They just gave you everything we grew up thinking we'd share. And you're telling me not to make it harder? The truth was, I knew exactly what they meant about my choices and problems. I'd struggled with addiction in my 20s. Cocaine, mostly, and some prescription pills when I couldn't get anything else. It had cost me my first marriage, several jobs, and yeah, some money I'd borrowed from my parents that I'd never been able to pay back. But I'd been clean for 8 years. 8 years of therapy, support groups, and rebuilding my life from scratch. I had a steady job as a medical technician, a small apartment that I kept spotless, and relationships that weren't built on lies and manipulation. I thought my parents had seen how hard I'd worked to turn my life around. Apparently they hadn't seen it, or they'd seen it and decided it didn't matter. The grandchildren thing, I said, my voice quieter now. Is that really what this is about? Emma had 2 kids, Tyler and Madison, ages 8 and 6, perfect little blonde children who called my parents grandma and grandpa and spent weekends at their house, leaving toys scattered around and filling the place with the kind of noise that made my parents light up in ways I'd never been able to. I'd never had children. My first marriage had ended before we got to that point, and my second relationship had been with someone who already had kids and didn't want more. After that, I'd focused on staying sober and building a career. By the time I felt stable enough to think about having a family, I was in my mid-30s and single. They loved being grandparents, Emma said softly. It gave them so much joy. And I gave them problems, I repeated the words from the letter. 8 years clean, a steady job, no drama, no asking for money. But I gave them problems. Mr. Henderson was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps you two would like to discuss this privately, he suggested. No, I said. I think we're done here. I stood up and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Emma. Just tell me one thing. Did you ask them to do this? Or was it their idea? She was quiet for a long moment. I never asked them to cut you out completely, she finally said. But I did talk to them about being worried about your stability, about whether you were really as changed as you seemed. There it was, the final confirmation that my own sister had helped orchestrate my exile from the family. I see, I said. Well, congratulations on your inheritance. I hope it brings you everything you deserve. I walked out of that office and into the cold March air, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The sky was gray and heavy with the promise of snow, and the wind cut through my coat like it was made of paper. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel and trying to figure out what to do next. The logical part of my brain was telling me to fight this, to hire a lawyer and contest the will. Surely there had to be some legal recourse for this kind of obvious favoritism. But the deeper, more honest part of me knew that wouldn't accomplish anything, except draining what little money I had saved. My parents had made their choice. They decided that Emma's life was worth more than mine, and no court was going to change their minds, even in death. I drove home to my apartment, a modest 1-bedroom place in a complex that was clean, but definitely not fancy. It was the kind of place you live in when you're rebuilding your life on a medical technician's salary. The kind of place that probably reinforced my parents' belief that I wasn't successful enough to deserve their respect. For the next 3 days, I called in sick to work and barely left my couch. I ordered takeout and watched mindless television and tried not to think about the fact that my sister was probably already making plans for what to do with 2 houses and more money than she'd ever need. On Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Emma. "Sarah, we need to talk." "I think you said enough at the lawyer's office. Please. Can I come over? There are things you don't understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed. She showed up an hour later with a bottle of wine and a box of tissues. Like she was preparing for a breakdown. Mine, or hers, I wasn't sure. "I brought wine," she said, holding up the bottle like a peace offering. "I don't drink anymore," I reminded her. 8 years. Remember? She looked embarrassed. "Right. I'm sorry. I forgot." We sat in my small living room, her on my second-hand couch, and me in the chair I'd bought at a garage sale. The contrast between us was stark. Even in casual clothes, she looked expensive. I looked like what I was, someone who shopped at Target and got her hair cut at Supercuts. "I know you're angry," she began. "Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Emma. I want you to understand something. I never wanted it to happen this way, but you didn't stop it from happening this way." She was quiet for a moment, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. It was a beautiful ring, probably cost more than I made in 3 months. "Do you remember when you stole money from Mom's purse to buy drugs?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. That was 12 years ago. "Do you remember when you pawned Dad's watch? The one his father gave him?" "I got it back. I saved up and got it back from the pawn shop. After 3 months. After he'd already grieved for it." I could see where this was going. "So this is about punishing me for things I did when I was sick. It's about them never being able to trust you again. Even after you got clean, they were always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every time you called, they wondered if you needed money. Every time you came over, Mom would count her jewelry afterward." That hit me harder than I expected. She counted her jewelry not because she thought you'd take it again, but because the fear was always there. You broke something in them, Sarah. You broke their ability to feel safe around you. I felt like I was going to be sick. I spent 8 years trying to earn back their trust. I know you did, and I saw how hard you worked. But they couldn't get past the fear. And then, when Tyler and Madison came along, she trailed off. When your perfect children came along, it was easier to focus on the family that didn't come with baggage. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot, where my 7-year-old Honda was parked next to a collection of other modest cars owned by people who, like me, were just trying to get by. They loved being grandparents more than anything. Emma continued, "Those kids gave them a purpose they hadn't had since we grew up. And I think in their minds, leaving everything to me was a way of making sure their grandchildren would be taken care of. So this was never about me at all. It was about securing Tyler and Madison's future. Partly, yet." I turned back to face her. "And you were okay with that? I tried to talk them into leaving you something. I really did, but Dad was stubborn, and after Mom died, he got even more set in his way. He said the business had to stay in the family, meaning with someone who had kids to pass it on to. I could have had kids, Emma. I chose to focus on getting healthy instead. I know that, but they saw it as another way you'd chosen your problems over building a real life." The cruelty of that assessment took my breath away. A real life. I'm just telling you what they thought. I'm not saying it was fair, but you didn't fight for me. She was quiet for a long time. "No," she finally admitted. "I didn't fight hard enough for you." "Why?" "Because I was scared. Scared that if I pushed too hard, they'd change their minds about everything. Scared that they'd decide neither of us deserved it. Scared that I'd end up jeopardizing my children's future for a principle." At least she was being honest. "So you chose your kids over your sister." "I chose security over uncertainty. I chose the sure thing over the gamble." "I wasn't a gamble. I wasn't a gamble, Emma. I was your sister." She started crying then, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I was weak when you needed me to be strong." I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "What happens now?" "I don't know. I was hoping we could figure that out together." "There's nothing to figure out. You got what you wanted." I got what I deserved, according to our parents. End of story. It doesn't have to be the end. I could give you some of the money. Not half, but something enough to help you buy a house or go back to school or whatever you want to do. The offer hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to take it, to let her ease her guilt with some token gesture that would make us both feel better about this whole situation. But another part of me, the part that had learned to survive without anyone's help, rejected the idea completely. I don't want your charity, I said. It wouldn't be charity. It would be what's right. What's right would have been our parents treating us equally. What's right would have been you standing up for me when it mattered. What's right would have been a lot of things that didn't happen. She was crying harder now. Please don't let this destroy what's left of our relationship. What relationship, Emma? When was the last time we talked before Mom got sick? When was the last time we spent time together that wasn't at a holiday dinner where we made polite conversation and pretended to be close? She didn't have an answer for that, probably because we both knew the truth. We'd been strangers wearing the costume of sisters for years. I should go, she said, standing up and gathering her purse. Yeah, you should. At the door, she turned back to me. For what it's worth, I am sorry about all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't change anything. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about everything that had happened. The inheritance, the letter, the conversation with Emma, all of it. And slowly, something started to shift inside me. The hurt was still there, and the anger, but underneath it all was something else. Relief. For 38 years, I'd been trying to earn my parents' love and approval. I'd been measuring myself against Emma and coming up short. I'd been carrying the weight of their disappointment and my own guilt about the mistakes I'd made in my 20s. But now it was over. They'd made their final judgment, and I was free from the exhausting cycle of trying to prove myself worthy of their love. They were gone, and their opinion of me was gone with them. The next morning, I went back to work. My colleagues in the lab where I worked were kind people who'd never known the messy details of my past. To them, I was just Sarah, the reliable tech, who always showed up on time and did good work. It felt good to be around people who judged me based on who I was now, not who I'd been 15 years ago. During my lunch break, I walked to the park across from the hospital where I work. It was one of those perfect spring days that makes you grateful to be alive, with clear skies and a warm breeze that carried the smell of blooming flowers. I sat on a bench and called my sponsor, Janet, a woman who'd been helping me navigate sobriety for the past 8 years. I heard about your parents' will, she said after I explained the situation. How are you handling it? Better than I expected, actually. Good. You know what this means, right? That my family thinks I'm a failure? No, it means you're finally free from trying to prove yourself to people who were never going to be satisfied with your proof. Janet had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. It was one of the reasons I'd trusted her to help guide me through recovery. I keep thinking I should be more upset, I told her. Why? Because someone decided not to give you something that was never really yours to begin with. It's not about the money. It's about what it represents. Which is what? I thought about it for a moment. That no matter how hard I worked to change, they never really forgave me for the person I used to be. So that hurts. Of course it does. But here's what I want you to think about. You forgave yourself for the person you used to be. You did the work to become someone you could be proud of. You don't need their permission to value the life you've built. She was right, as usual. I'd spent so much energy trying to earn back their respect that I'd forgotten to notice how much I'd come to respect myself. The woman sitting on that park bench was someone I genuinely liked. She was responsible, caring, honest, and strong. She'd survived addiction, divorce, financial struggles, and family rejection, and she was still standing. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote in a journal, not about my problems or my pain, but about my plans. What did I want to do with my life now that I was no longer trying to live up to someone else's expectations? I wanted to travel. I'd never been anywhere except Florida to visit my parents' vacation home, and I'd always wondered what it would be like to see other places. Maybe I could save up for a trip to Europe or take a cruise. I wanted to go back to school. I'd always been interested in nursing, but I'd never pursued it because I was worried about the time and money investment. Now, without the pressure of proving myself to my parents, it seemed possible. I wanted to help other people in recovery. My own journey had taught me how isolating addiction could be, and how crucial it was to have people who understood what you were going through. Over the next few weeks, I started taking concrete steps toward these goals. I researched nursing programs and financial aid options. I opened a savings account specifically for travel. I signed up to volunteer at a local recovery center. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of running away from something. A month after the will reading, Emma called me again. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, without preamble, "about me not fighting for you. Emma, we don't need to do this again." "Yes, we do," because I realized something. I was so afraid of losing what I had that I forgot what it means to be a decent person. I didn't say anything, waiting to see where she was going with this. I talked to my lawyer. "I want to give you half of everything. I told you I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's what should have happened in the first place. Mom and Dad were wrong, and I was wrong to go along with it. What changed your mind?" Tyler asked me why you haven't been coming to family dinners anymore, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. I didn't want to tell him that his grandparents decided his aunt wasn't worth loving, and I went along with it. I was quiet for a moment, processing this. "What did you tell him?" I told him that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt people they love, and that I was trying to figure out how to fix a mistake I made. And what did he say? He said maybe I should just say sorry and try to do better. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Smart kid. He gets that from his aunt, I think. We met the following week to discuss the details. Emma was true to her word. She wanted to split everything 50-50. The house, the vacation home, the business, the savings accounts, all of it. "I can't take half," I told her. "The business should stay with you. You understand it, and you have kids to think about. Then what do you want?" I thought about it. The vacation house. And enough money to go back to school. That's not even close to half. It's enough. We worked out an arrangement that felt fair to both of us. I would get the house in Florida, which I could either keep or sell, plus a lump sum that would cover nursing school and leave me with a nice emergency fund. Emma would keep the family business and the main house, which made sense since she had children who might want to inherit those things someday. But more importantly, we started talking, really talking, for the first time in years, about our childhood, about the pressure we'd both felt to be perfect, about the ways our parents' favoritism had damaged both of us. "I know you think I had it easy," Emma said during one of our conversations, "but being the favorite wasn't easy either. I always felt like I had to be perfect, like one mistake would make them love me less. At least you knew they loved you. Did I? Or did I just know they loved the version of me that I presented to them?" It was a good question, and it made me think about the ways we'd both been trapped by our parents' expectations. Emma had been trapped by the need to be perfect, and I'd been trapped by the impossibility of ever being good enough. 6 months later, I was enrolled in nursing school and living in the Florida house, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. The ocean air and warm weather felt like a fresh start, and I'd found a part-time job at a local clinic that allowed me to keep my skills sharp while focusing on my studies. Emma and I talked regularly now, real conversations about our lives and hopes and fears. She was seeing a therapist to work through her guilt about the inheritance situation, and I was proud of her for taking that step. Tyler and Madison came to visit me over spring break, and for the first time, I got to be the aunt I'd always wanted to. We built sandcastles, and went fishing, and stayed up too late watching movies. They were good kids, funny and kind and curious about the world. "Aunt Sarah," Madison said on their last night, "are you happy living here by yourself?" "I am," I told her. And I meant, sometimes being by yourself is exactly where you need to be. But don't you get lonely? Sometimes. But lonely isn't the same as alone. I have friends here, and I have you guys, and I have your mom, and most importantly, I have myself. She looked puzzled by that answer, but Tyler, who was older, seemed to understand. "You mean you like who you are now?" he said. "Exactly. A year later, I graduated from nursing school with honor." Emma, Tyler, and Madison all came to the ceremony, and Emma cried harder than I did when I walked across the stage to get my diploma. After the ceremony, we went out to dinner at a nice restaurant, overlooking the water. "I'm proud of you," Emma said, raising her glass of wine in a toast. "Mom and Dad would be proud too." "No," I said, raising my glass of iced tea. "They wouldn't, and that's okay. I'm proud of me, and that's what matters." It was the truth. I'd spent so many years seeking validation from people who were incapable of giving it to me, that I'd forgotten how good it felt to validate myself. The woman I'd become was someone worth being proud of, regardless of what anyone else thought. As I sat there with my sister and her children, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I realized that losing my parents' inheritance had actually been a gift. It had forced me to let go of the need for their approval and focus on building a life that made me happy. I thought about the letter my father had written, about how he'd said I'd given them nothing but problems and disappointment. He was wrong about that, but it had taken me losing everything to realize it. I'd given them a daughter who survived addiction and rebuilt her life from scratch. I'd given them a daughter who refused to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. I'd given them a daughter who learned to love herself enough to stop begging for love from people who couldn't give it. That wasn't nothing. That was everything. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the sky faded from pink to purple to deep blue. Emma and the kids headed back to their hotel, and I walked alone on the beach, my feet sinking into the cool sand with each step. I was 39 years old, single, and starting over in a new career. By my parents' standards, I was probably still a disappointment, but by my own standards, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.